Welcome to Portals of Perception and to the Universalis episode 22. Kyriaki, Karen, welcome.
Hello, Aviv. Hello, Karen. Great to be with you.
Hello, Aviv. Hello, Kyriaki. Very good to be here.
So this episode 22, I have two working titles. It's self-leadership in the violet intensification and the currency of the future. And I'm going to offer a very brief backstory, what brought us today on this recording, and then we're going to launch into the journey and see where it takes us. So we're here today to reenact and develop, not just reenact, develop content that emerged yesterday in an event with the Epoch Network. And the way that spontaneous event came about was that just a few days earlier, I sent a message, hey, everybody, whoever is available on a spontaneous short notice, could we turn up? There is something to attend to. And the impulse when that message went out was there is so much that's happening in the world. We are recording this by the end of February 25. It probably will take a few months before it's published, but I anticipate the trajectories that catalyzed this event and this conversation will be in force. And the sense of it was that so much is happening on so many fronts, and one can hardly keep up with the evolving story of the epoch that we've been tracking here for the last 5 years, and that there was a need to come together to, very much in the spirit of on the move, take notice of what's going on. The morning after that message went out, something came through and it led to a 6-page document that we then read through in the event and brought the collective intelligence of the network to build and develop on that. And what I did last night was I harvested some segments of that writing into 12 slides. I propose that I bring the slides. Karen, you give us a voiceover of the slide, and then we speak to it a little bit and go through the journey. So one could listen to this, could come along for the ride with us as a contemplative, meditative journey, where you could literally pause the recording as you watch it and read the slide and stay with it and do what we did in the live event yesterday, which brought different voices to build on that. So how about that as a plan? And is there anything you'd want to offer before we actually get to the first slide, just from what's alive in you as we approach this, please?
Well, it sounds very promising, and I love the title of self leadership, because at times where everything is shape shifting, what we decide and how we hold ourselves in various situations gains a different gravity. So I think exploring self-leadership at these times is really, really, really very important.
Yeah. When we gathered together, there was another title which may come up or not, and it was called The Chamber of Resolve. And I think there's a significance in that to share, because the implication in a chamber is something that is in a designated space, and it has a specific ecology that access to may be for everybody, or it may be determined by a certain level of preparation. And that, in a way, will determine what may be possible and the order of sharing and deepening and intelligence gathering that is possible when you gather in such a space where there is a purposeful, in a way, a purposeful core that people are exploring and gathering around.
Thank you. Thank you both for those starter comments. Yes, self-leadership is, as we're going to describe, an essential element of not just surviving, but thriving and responding to the opportunities of this time. And the fuller title actually that went with the invite said triage in the Chamber of Resolve, or a Chamber of Resolve triage, in the sense that we are in an on-the-move, dramatic global events unfolding in the world, and triage is usually taken in as a word to describe something that happened in an incident or an accident or in a war zone, and we didn't mean it in this sense. We meant it more in the sense of, although there are wars all over the planet, we meant it more in the sense of the triage of one's journey, one's psycho-spiritual developmental journey, and how do you triage the emergent needs and possibilities of those changing situations. And one of the one of the disciplines of the practice of triage is prioritizing. What do you attend to first? And we, as you're saying, Karen, we attended yesterday foundationally to the priority is to encourage and fortify in anybody that is living at this time with intentional purpose, the sense of resolve. That was the priority. And so what is it we can do individually? What is it we can do as networks of people all over the planet to strengthen, to encourage, to fortify each other in living intentionally to your fullest possibility and potential, whatever circumstance and environment you operate in. Okay, so with that, let me bring the slide, and we'll get rowing or rolling, whatever feels right. So tell me if you see this all right. Okay. So the Universalis project number 22, self-leadership in the violet intensification. So the violet intensification is, well, is how we describe this time and how we often talk about it as the indigo-violet intensification because they actually play together, and the context is the unfolding story of the epoch. Part of the reason why I felt compelled to call for a meeting yesterday was also the over and above what we just talked about a moment ago in the sense of resolve, was the awareness that something is arising now with many people. There is a yearning and intuition and an instinct that's arising with many people globally, and there are all sorts of ways people analyze this time. So some people who their background and experience and know-how relates to political sciences, they analyze the global drama through political lens or through geopolitical lens and or through economic lens, all of which are relevant lens and important lens to actually integrate into the story. And there are those who bring developmental lens and look through different leaders in the world and make commentaries about the developmental level from which different leaders operate, all of which is useful and important and relevant, and comes into my appraisal as well. And I get educated and enlightened by many who are reflecting and commenting about the nature of this time. The unique awareness that I have is that nobody is looking at this through the lens of the sevenfold epochal fractal or epochal pattern that we've been tracking for several years, in which there is actually the awareness that there are stages, so to speak, of phases in the evolutionary story, but there are always also fractals within fractals. So there are ways in which we can describe a red and orange fractal inside a violet intensification, inside a context of a violet cycle that brings to a conclusion an end of a 3,000 or 3,500 year epoch and a new epoch that's onsetting. So a lot about that and the story of the epoch is we have addressed in previous Universalis conversations and other conversations on portals that can be found. We're not going to retrace that. What I'm highlighting and naming on the front end is that the lens through which we came into this is an appreciation and a mapping for me, a mapping that has gone on for 3 or 4 decades of this pattern in which we are able to sometime in a matter of days or weeks recognize the rise, the intensification of specific natures. And when we say specific natures, we are referring to the red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet, and what they each represent, not as an idea, not as a concept, but rather as a living emergent pattern that can be observed, can be seen in every aspect of life. So that's what I'd say about self-leadership in the violet intensification, which is that everything we're about to go through is framed within the context of a violet intensification, indigo violet intensification, in which one of the key ideas we're about to reflect on is the currency of the future. So I suspect I didn't know I was going to say what I just said. I think you might have something to say about this right here, or shall I go to slide 1? Please, let me make a space here. I intuit Karen might have something to say about this.
I feel ready to go to slide 1.
Okay, great. So let's begin, please, Karen. Give us a voiceover.
Number 1, an attunement practice. Reflect inwardly and ask yourself, which unique quality am I called to embody to ease the process of evolution?
So this comes out of a living practice that certainly I have embraced maybe for 4 decades, which is the idea of bringing to focus specific quality. In the work I do with executives and leaders for 3 decades now, I would often ask a senior executive, well, which is the quality you need to focus and emphasize in yourself? And I would often bring up this inquiry because so much in the business world, they focus on the to-dos and the strategies and the tactics that they need to implement. And sometimes what I would encourage is a bit of an introspective, turning inside to reflect on the who do you want to be And how do you want to be seen when you are leading this with your team? And in this, there is also the perennial wisdom that when we talk about qualities, we're sourcing, we're engaging a domain that has unlimited shelf life. In other words, it is a living, vibrant domain of renewing energies and potencies, because each and every quality that you choose to focus on is not a word, is not a concept, but a living, vibrant essence that can fill your life with capacities and perceptions. So what we actually did yesterday in this was there was an invitation to listen to it inside and see what turns up. And then there was a bit of a quiet pause, and there was an invitation to sense, where do you feel this quality? Do you feel it in your headspace? Do you feel it above, around the head? Do you feel it more in the neck area? Is it a presence or a nature or a quality that's appearing? The area of the chest or the torso or the entire body, or throbbing through your veins, or the heart area? Where do you sense and feel that? And then in the practice, there was an invitation to bring this quality to the area of the solar plexus and truly let that ecology expand and permeate. And obviously, in this case, the invitation was to do so in relation to this prospect of what do you feel called to bring forward by way of a quality or a nature to ease the process of evolution, which is a pursuit that we have been engaged in for 5 years. So it's not a concept or just an intellectual notion. Rather, it has now a living, vibrant sense. And just some of what came through from people in the network was a trusting buoyancy, settlement to change, communion of not knowing, clarity, readiness to abide, resilience, accepting the unknown, awareness, versatility, listening with openness, a caring heart, courage, simplicity, resolve, hope, trueness to purpose, and stillness. So we spent just the first few minutes in that collective, shall I say, plasma making, essence generating of those qualities and those domains that really became the conductive vessel inside of which everything that we then journeyed into was made possible. So anything you'd say to that first step? The other thing, as you think what you want to offer to this, was we wanted to start with a practice. Before we launch into saying anything or doing anything, this idea that forever we are each a whole human. We're not just living in our heads with words and notions. So how do we bring the whole human online? Inner lives, soul, and the symphony of processes and perceptions that's present in us, and the cultivation of qualities is a perennial practice that we come back to again and again.
Yes, I find this as a very important first step in any gathering and in any conclave of people to come together and speak, especially about what is happening in the world currently. That we come, each one of us, as an ambassador of an essence, because what makes us humans in a way important in the picture is that we can be the vessel of essences, and we can be the vessel of qualities and values that have a completely different rarefied energy and power that is that can move really mountains. So I think when we come together with a conscious awareness that we want to bring to the table care or courage or compassion or clarity or being forensic or being flexible. So these are really human qualities that can create a mosaic that is really being able to see the situation from different angles and also to heal it, to be dialectic in it. And I think it's very important to do that as a first step.
This practice, which brings all of our faculties into the process, makes me think of the dimensions of knowledge that we spoke of in an earlier recording, where you're not entering the process from a reference conceptual place. And it's an invitation for people to, as Kyriaki says, bring their best, bring their unique alignments and their potencies to the actual engagement. There are many ways of activating the sentiment and the process engagement levels, but this one you can actually feel it resonating throughout the different parts. And for me, the way I'm wired, I'm looking at this slide, and what was rising in me was wanting to paint the background, which is probably a little bit late in this recording, but the nature of the colours and how it could be configured was becoming activated, which is interesting in itself.
Indeed, indeed. Thank you. Thank you, Karen. Yes, you would be making this a lot more beautiful than me putting these slides late last night. So with what you're both offering, it now leads us to step 2, to slide 2. I would just put a marker that we may want to at some point come back to talk even in a broader sense about the Universalis human. And because we've been tracking this entire journey, the capacities and the faces of a Universalis human. And it strikes me that there is something for us to come back to dedicate a full episode or more to appreciating the configurational and reconfigurational potential of a Universalis human, in the sense that we can choose in different functions and in different situational needs to configure ourselves as a cosmology of unique qualities. So that in itself is a very important appreciation and innate capacity that we feel is coming online for a Universalis human. which is that you're not just the you that you think that you are with your name in your driver license and whatever documents. You are actually, in the human function, you are a configuration of qualities and essences that you bring to bear. And I just see that in saying that, perhaps the last slide that we will get to. So with that, let us get to number 2, please.
Number 2, self-leadership. A self-initiated, self-arising, self-authoring generation, committed to healing and refining work, is essential for unlocking the higher potential of the transformative shift underway.
Yes, so there are three threads, important threads here. One is a build on the work we've done a year or a couple of years ago, in this sense of the end of the guru era, in the sense that we have entered a time where even when we learn from others, and there are gifted teachers we can learn from, the nature of this time, the nature of what we are detecting in this and tracing in that sense of an epoch that's coming to an end and a new epoch that's onsetting and emerging, is one where, and inside the context of a universalis human, there is the premise that we are each having a one-on-one direct engagement with the universe. Inside of which, in another broader context, and in the next slide after that, in step 3, we will bring again to significance the gathering, the collection, the sense of distributed leadership. But before we can enter a gathering of people who are focusing on a unified mission, to do so in the spirit of what we are called to do, we first have to become individuated and agentic in the fullest sense, in which self-leadership is the way and the fashioning of that. So that's why this sense of self-initiated, self-arising, self-authoring, all of which is indicating I can take full responsibility and I can guide my living endeavor. And actually, even when I don't know, and even when I seek help, and I can more precisely seek help when I take responsibility to be in charge of the opportunity that this life is. It has that sense. And so that's thread 1. Thread 2 is that calls for an ongoing generation. A generation that's committed to healing, committed to development, committed to refinement work, committed to forever be a work in progress in the crucible that we each are as a living human at this time. And what this step 2 or slide 2 says is, right, we've got to do that. We've got to be self-authoring, self-arising. We've got to be generative and do the work if we are to unlock the potential that becomes available. And what is not written here but is implicit, that with the pressure and the intensity of what we are describing in the violet intensification, if you do not step up, if you do not initiate yourself, if you do not give yourself permission to be the full agentic human that you are and can be, in a way you abdicate, in a way you step back, in a way you begin to die, dare I say, to the larger potential and to what it is that life and the universe is proffering for you. So I'd offer that as a way of abiding with self-leadership. Please.
Yeah, I'd like to speak a little to this because in my mind, this is one of the most crucial aspects of this moment in time. And if you think there's our self-awareness of our being, and there's this vast universe that we want to be integrated with, and the two have an apparent separation, then how do we actually integrate unless we actually work with the inner configurations and see how they can change and how we can affect subtle and powerful changes that open different gates and different pathways. And it's a very, I'm hesitant to use the word mystical, but it's mystical in the way that we're discovering how things work and how when you spend time with something that has an inner arising that is in a way crafted and fashioned, possibly releasing something that might already be latent and within, and how that with the generation and with the continuation of aligning work, somehow new ways of thinking and new ways of connecting, new awarenesses and new perceptions actually have access. And we're talking about, it's in the title, isn't it? The currencies. And this is part of it. And I feel as though I'm just absolutely touching the very edges of what is such important work for awarenesses for humans at this time. And in a way, the passion I have to create new maps of meaning and what that might mean and how that might happen. And the self-initiating, self-arising, self-regulating, self-authoring, all these conscious endeavors are crucial and part of it.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And I'm thinking that especially in times of change, and especially when we are granted, let's say, higher permissions, higher universal permissions, and we need to make a leap in ourselves, self-leadership and being doing the work yourself is very important. It's like someone is giving you, let's say, a Stradivarius violin. If you don't know how to play it, if you don't practice it, if you don't take, the steps, it doesn't matter what kind of violin it is. The same if someone gives you, let's say, a Porsche car and you don't know how to drive it. So it's like there is a higher permission, but you cannot, let's say, be like a parrot that just speaks and imitates something. You need really to work on it from your own self to integrate it in your life, and that will give you the platform. That will give you the platform where the higher electrics can sit. Otherwise, you're just a follower, just drifting along with with the waves and the currencies, but to be able to hold the higher conductivities, you can only do so when you work daily with your marks, with your rituals, with the people you deal with. And I'm not saying that you are not open to different ideas and teachings and so on, but there has to be the scaffolds of your own work. Otherwise, it doesn't sit. It cannot sit. It cannot hold. It comes, but it cannot hold.
So implicit in what you're both offering is the awareness, the observation that is one of the ailments, one of the disease of this time we can describe as the great displacement. And what I mean by the great displacement is that too many people are displaced from themselves. So when we tell the epochal story, we describe how when we were part of tribal formations and there was no arising of the self, that was all right, because you were part of a tribe entity, a tribe configuration. But the project of the last 6 to 4 centuries, between other things, from a universal perspective, was to release the human to its individuated permission. So now we're at the back end of these 6 centuries, and we're needing to find a way to work again together in a whole other new way, which is what the next slide will talk about. But in that transitional moment with the intensity of what's in the news and it used to be that a new fashion will emerge for a couple, 3 years. A fashion now changes every few hours, every few minutes, every few seconds. So in terms of the velocity of impression that a life is exposed to, a young life is exposed to when they are, say, on social media or in any arena really, is so intense that they find it very difficult to be engaged and sustained and tethered inside. Because in a simple way to describe it is when I describe the disease of the great displacement is you are forever exposed to so much that if you are not tethered inside will cause in you the feeling that you are not enough, you are not sufficient, you are behind, you needed to catch up on 3 other books or 7 other movies or 10 other ideas, wherever the arena that you're playing, all of which may be important. But if you can't actually engage with the influx of life by continually doing the work on the inside, where Kyriaki, what you pointed to is developing your ritual, developing your ceremonies, individual and family and collective ceremonies, and come back to doing the work of your own reasoning and your own choice making. This is why, as you added, Karen, self-regulating. It's very good to be self-initiated and self-arising and self-authoring, but along that journey, you continually need to regulate, because if you don't regulate your nervous system, you're not very useful for anything else. So all of that is a way of saying, okay, if indeed, Karen, as you described this as in a mystical sense, we are entering a dance of partnering with the universe, which I think was the name of the Universalis episode 8, then to partner, we need to show up for the dance party. To show up for the dance party with the universe, you've got to be yourself. Now, what does it mean to be yourself? Okay, that's a lifelong journey that we are each on, what we are inviting here is to take up the intent, to take up the work of it, to make that part of your daily work, which brings me to number 3, please.
Number 3, distributed leadership, an epoch discovery lab. Significant events unfold daily, even while focusing on demanding projects. Everyday moments, sparked by a new scientific breakthrough, a geopolitical shift, or an inspiring work of art, compel me to step into an epoch discovery lab, to endeavour to decode the patterns and sevenfold fractals shaping these events, examining the above and below the line elements with a forensic eye. Ideally, this lab would consist of 20 to 40 individuals from diverse disciplines, united by the mission to explore and understand these transformative dynamics.
So there's several things in this number 3. The first of which I'm simply describing that I intended to be in a writing retreat as I'm working to write the next chapters of Portals into the Soul. But who was it that said man makes plans and the universe laughs, something like that? So it's very difficult to be in a writing retreat without being called time and again into it, and adjacent and other processes. And so that's the first thing I'm describing here. The second thing I'm describing is that when entering the mental frame and the process of focusing on an epoch discovery lab, I forever feel that sense of insufficiency, that I need to be together with 20 or 30 or 40 or 200 people who are each brilliant in their own way, who are pursuing their own particular discipline or domain of knowledge or set of practices, and that we've got to be in a dialogical, conversational, co-arising, co-creating discovery that actually what is showing up by way of a pattern and by way of decoding the intelligence of what is arriving, it requires a multifaceted set of configurations and developmental lines and talents and capabilities, all engaging in the exploration from that place of we love more the inquiry than we love our individual point of view. We love more what the inquiry enables and facilitates in terms of possibility for humanity than any personal achievement. We're prepared to transcend all of that, to be guided by the mission, in a sense, of easing or facilitating the transformational intelligence that is coming online for humanity. So that's what inspired this number 3.
Yes, and it's very important as new machinations are going on in all fields of life, that there is a process of discussion, I would say, of conversation, because a lot of things happen very quickly and we don't have time to process them or to view them from different perspectives. So, for example, the way artificial intelligence is developing, And there is no process or discussion of, from different perspectives. So from the education point of view, or from the religious point of view, or from ethical point of view, or scientific point of view, or how we can really converse on something and bring different aspects of how this may affect life, or the different facets of life, or the different facets of the human psyche, or the human brain, or the human relationships. And it's very important to have different people from different faculties to bring their point of view, so that we can then determine on balances, on policies, on regulations. So I think this is very important. And there's in the domain of art, for example, there are new things happening. And I recently went to a theatrical performance that I've never been in such a kind of theatrical performance. That the moment you stepped in the theater, you were part of the play. And so they welcome you, the actors, and you were part of the play. So a part of me was really, really baffled, because usually we go as viewers, and I didn't know what to do. Am I a viewer now? Am I a part of the play? What's going on here? And it was really breaking down my coming to see a theater as a spectator from a distance. So it was really kind of facing, because I didn't know how to act at the point. It was a very interesting experience. And I'm just using it as an example of how things may be requiring us to come from a participatory rather than from watching from a distance. That's what I would put in at the moment.
Yeah, there's two things I'd like to add here. One is, when I read this, I thought, right, let's find 20 to 40 individuals and train ourselves to do this. And I thought, well, I was thinking about a group that I'm actually working with. And on Saturday, 8 of us gathered around the question of why we were called to actually do the work that we're doing at this time. And I thought, well, that's a start. I mean, it's 8 people, but with the level of individual contributions into that, which were all different, but they all had, we all agreed with everything that was said. There was a consensual platform from which we can move on into the work that we want to do, which is specifically to explore one of the spectrum colors from an inner developmental perspective. So in a way, that's a sort of microcosm experimental discovery journey towards what I feel this is talking to, because we don't always have to look to the bigger and then see ourselves at distance from it. Sometimes it's looking at where we are, the steps that we've made, and the next step from where we are, which has a huge value and that should never be diminished. The other thing I wanted to share was a writing, I believe it's called Knowings and Perceptions, something similar. And one of the concepts I remember from that is to do with emergence and emergency living in the same place. And when you're looking at the above and below the line, it's not always that polarity and differentiation. It is a differentiation, but it's a matter of address and attitude and focus of what is possible to evolve and move on. Again, the self-regulation comes into that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Karen, for catching this thread about the above and below, which is something we addressed earlier in an earlier epoch conversation with Jeff van der Kloot, and perhaps also addressed in one of the earlier Universalis conversations, where there is the awareness that as we describe the evolutionary process, it continually manifests with a sense of potential, evolutionary potential, above the line when and where humans are naturally oriented to the purposes of life. Okay, I said words that, given a different time, we would need to pause here and decode more, but I'll just take it as a given that we addressed this before, and we'll come back to it again. So the above the line represents evolutionary possibility in the sense of growth, refinement, development, potential. Below the line often is an expression of the line of trauma, the line of pain, the line of separation, and how the aggregation of those experiences create its own pattern that continues to repeat itself, including using new potential, new technology, new insert of mental, emotional, even spiritual potential can be used in a way that divorce from its original sourcing intent and is used up in what we're describing below the line. So one of the reasons we're saying that is because so much of it is playing out now in this violet intensification. And the reason we need to come and bring together groups of people like Karen, you're describing you're working with a group of 8 people or 12 people sometime. Well, we need, your pathfinding, you're leading. Kyriaki has a similar endeavor adjacent. And imagine that what we need all over the world would be million or 10 million pods of 6 to 12 people who are each engaged in their own inquiry. They may be using different language than what we're using here. But the driving sentiment, the driving motivation is this sense of stepping up to be a functioning human in its fullest sense and capacity through this time of change. Some people will focus more on the ecological, environmental aspects. Some people will focus more on the ethical dimensions, and some people will focus on the new forms of theatrical productions, as you're describing, Kyriaki, where it emulates, what it tells me is that this is why it's indigo violet intensification. What it tells me is that there is a breakdown of boundaries, and whoever is behind the production recognizes that this idea that we're describing, which is that each and every human is now coming online to partner with the universe, that is an apparent opportunity in all the fields of art. So over the last couple of decades, they've increasingly been searching for that kind of how do you choreograph an experience? That you can step into an ecology and the boundaries disappear. And the boundaries disappear not because you injected chemistry into your brain. You don't have to do this with psychedelics at all. You can do this as part of the choreography of the experience. So, right, what we are proposing in the sense of an epoch discovery lab is a scenario where different disciplines, different capacities, different talents come together to respond to the question of the hour. Question of the hour may be, what is the new economic models that are emerging, and what will be economic models that will work tomorrow? Or the question of the hour may be centering on the new modalities of healing, or the new ways of governing large scales groups or organizations or even nations. All of those can be the inquiry of the hour. So that leads me now to number 4.
Number 4, dying and rebirthing daily. Each day brings its own cycle of release and renewal. Internally, we may experience a part that is dying as a new part begins to emerge. This process can be surprising, painful, devastating, confusing, and destabilizing. We might feel triggered, polarized, stunned, and even numb. Yet, as the old parts die, emergent opportunities arise, breathing new life into our experiences and fostering the birth of fresh connections and possibilities.
Well, this the catalyst for this is also in the recent Portals into the Soul event, where we describe this sense of an epoch that's dying, an epoch that is arising, and that these epochs are not just happening out there, they're happening inside each one of us. And the sense of searching to embrace that as part of the actuality of living today, which is you don't have to wait for the last moment when you leave this planet. You're actually releasing and allowing parts of you to die on a daily basis. And if you don't allow that, you're going to find it extremely difficult to journey on with the program, so to speak, that the universe has for us, revealingly so, because the velocity of change requires us to be able to release and put down gently even strongly held beliefs, and welcome new ways and new perspectives and new perceptions of seeing the world. So this is a lot easier said than done. The process itself can be surprising and confusing and discombobulating and destabilizing. And we can indeed be triggered in all sorts of ways. So the invitation here is to recognize that there are these 3 processes concurrently occurring. There is a part of us that's dying. There is a new part that's birthing, and there is the in-between liminality of not knowing. And inside it, it becomes even clearer why we have to do the self-regulation, the self-balancing, the self-authoring work to facilitate these such that they don't just clash with each other, but rather that they may be allowed to co-arise. I recognize as I describe this that this has been the fascination of my entire adult life, way before I understood what I was even looking at. I remember it must be now 40 years, I'm guessing, in my early 20s when I saw for the first time I think the name of the movie was The Last Emperor, the story of the last emperor in China and how the revolution kicked him out of his palace and he becomes a gardener looking after the plants. And the last scene in the movie, they see him as an old man coming to sit in the palace that is now a place that people visit. And he's visiting his old world as a child that he was raised to believe was all for him and will belong to him. And I watched the movie time and time again because my inner quest has always been this conundrum of what is it that occurs in a person's life when they were born and raised into one paradigm, and then early in life that paradigm gets destroyed, gets demolished, disappears. And they have two options. They either die with it, or they actually are prepared to give rise to a new way of seeing the world. One that truly is prepared to hospice and put to rest the old way they've seen the world and prepared to midwife and arise with new living possibility and actually live into the new possibility without forever living in the frozen backward look of the world that's no longer there, which is most people, or many people, I don't know if most, many people live through their life and they had a formative experience that they remain attached to, and they forever proceed into their life gazing back to that moment. Now, you can actually gaze back into important seminal moments in your life and actually extract wisdom and knowledge to journey forward into what is unfolding. That's different to being frozen by those events. So the awareness of dying and rebirthing, and that these processes co-arise and co-occur in us, and that while a part of me is dying, there is a whole new part of me that is emerging, is rebirthing, is very deep, introspective, and also interpersonal. This is where it's very useful to be in a dialogical discovery with others, where those inner contemplations can be brought to the surface, where we search for language and for a decoding of the phenomenology of the experience and how is it playing out. And I think as I describe this and as I listen to what I'm saying, it occurs to me that this is very much the vein of the idea of or the actuality of a universalis human. Because what we say in a universalis humans, we're really saying this is a human that is coming online that has this capacity to rebirth itself time and again in the image of how the universe configures you today. So what would you want to say to this, please?
Yeah, there's also this idea. It was captured in one of our recent gatherings that someone can be. I think it was in our last Portals event, that someone can be evergreen in a way. So there is a process of renewal because the trees that are evergreen are also renewing themselves, but they are evergreen. So there is some parts of them that are constant and some parts of them that are changing, and both processes happen at the same time. And I think also that any process of change, and there was a writing I wrote at a certain moment of the 9 lessons from what we have to learn from crabs that are molting, because crabs often their body outgrows their skeleton, which is outside, their hard part, by 1/3. So slowly there is a new body that is being built under their skeleton, their exoskeleton, but at a certain time it cracks very suddenly. It seems sudden, but it's not so sudden. And they change all their parts, even their eyes, even their hands, everything. And they are very vulnerable at that time. They are very soft and very, very vulnerable until they slowly, their body becomes hard again. So I think there is a great lesson there of that there are times where we outgrow our habits, our systems, our society, our beliefs. There's something that grows from within, and now we need to shed that and make a bigger container, build a bigger container that will be able to hold the new body, the new growth. There are many great lessons there. But definitely there is the time of the shift. It's not an easy process. It's actually very painful and dangerous times, because that's when usually the fishes go and eat the crabs. So I think in these times of change, knowing that and admitting that a part needs to die, and being reconciled with the fact of it is important to help you proceed and to let go, being able to let go.
This makes me think about being self-authored again, but in a slightly different context, because this paragraph starts with each day, and I'm thinking of this more in the more closer in and the more smaller shifts, not the huge one that you spoke of with the emperor and quite dramatic changes, but in the sense of the recalibration that is required every day as things are moving and as we're being influenced by many different things. Some are emanatory persuasions that are potent and powerful and we will want to move with, and others are questionable and shaky, and others will trigger and bring things from our past. And what it causes me to think about is to have multiple processes as part of one's self-authoring, so that in a way there's the self-authoring gives you a certain degree of the self-leadership we're talking about. So if in one area there's an exposure, you're exposed to something that is uncomfortable, that you need to regulate, put down, then do it gently and move on to an area that is nourishing. And in a way, you use your self-authoring to create many options, so that as you navigate your way through this life, through each day, you have greater control of what you know will be nourishing and potent and of service to maybe your family or a larger universal purpose, but doesn't take you away, and really being responsible for the energy flows that you choose to connect to, at the same time as moving on from those that are dying.
It's curious that this already begins to induct the tone of advisory brief, which is slide 12 at this stage. So I'm going to lead us into number 5. And I think what we are about to do is we'll do number 5, and then we will do a pause, because we're not doing a Joe Rogan here. We don't do 4 hours episodes. So we actually, I thought we will do this in one go. Looks to me like we're going to have to break it into 2 episodes. So please, Karen, lead us with number 5.
Number 5, differential speeds of collapse and emergence. Collapse and emergence do not occur at the same place. A breakdown and implosion can happen suddenly, often after a prolonged period of slow, persistent erosion. For instance, a coastal bluff may collapse in an instant, while the growth of a new oak tree spans years. Similarly, within us, the melting and disintegration of old structures can be both acute and sudden, even when we initially struggle to perceive it. This process opens the way for the emergence of new capacities and configurations.
So a lead into this is your comment on the previous slide, Karen, because this is an invitation to recognize that there are different energies and different speeds and different patterns and different sequences of how the dying and the rebirthing, the fading and the re-emerging, the collapse and the emergence, how these processes occur, and that they are naturally arising and occurring in nature and naturally arising and occurring in us. I mean, at a cellular level, we are dying all the time and rebirthing ourselves all at the same time. And it's one thing where it occurs at the biological automated level, where it doesn't need our conscious surveillance. It's a whole other thing where it comes to the world that we hold in our mind and the world of beliefs and maps of meanings that we uphold, because generationally speaking, people that were fashioned and formed in the 20th century still struggle to recognize that the world is very different. And it's not just that the world did not end, the history didn't end when Fukuyama told in the early 90s that history ended. It actually accelerated ever since in its nature of change. So what this calls for is heightened awareness to the interior management of those domains of awarenesses and speeds. And as you said, how do you calibrate and how do you regulate your energy? Where, for example, just as one example, the importance of naming things, the importance of acknowledging what no longer is, the importance of that as part of the hospicing of what no longer is the case, and yet acknowledging and honoring whatever role it played in bringing us to date, whether it's at the infrastructure of society at large, when we are prepared to recognize what cannot be resurrected from the modern operating system. There are elements that we hope to recreate and harvest and harness to the future, but there are certain aspects and certain institutions that are falling apart at the moment. And they're falling apart because they're no longer able to withstand the pressure of what is unfolding. Now, this is where the next slide is going to lead us into some of those big moves. And it's easy to fall into the false premise and the trap of thinking that everything that's occurring in the implosion of Western democracies is just a regressive pattern. It is a regressive pattern, but there has to be an inquiry. Why is there a regressive pattern that's occurring? What is its meaning? What were some of the built-in obsolescence and bugs in the system in the way it developed over the last 3 or 4 centuries that bring the modern operating system now to its implosion? How does that relate to the field of knowledge and the fields of perception? And how do we configure the significance of human life? All those are inquiries we've got to ask and explore in the context of being prepared then to, this is where we said we need an epoch discovery lab, a crucible of discovery with others, in which some of the capacities, we will have some of the people in that configuration are people that create rituals, create ceremonies, because we may be debating and exploring certain aspects in society and the global culture, and what will emerge will produce enormous amount of grief because of what is dying, and there will need to be an in the moment capacity to fashion a ritual of acknowledging that and honoring the essence of what it was that is now dying, and being prepared to accompany the ritual with a sentiment that is prepared to release what is dying rather than holding on to it, because we can't hold on to it because it is no longer supported. So if you try to hold to a dying leaf, you're no longer touching the tree, you're touching something that has died and is not connecting you to the flow of life. And if the core premise is that we want to be tethered to the flow of life, we need to be able to make that distinction, this differentiation of honoring what was, hospicing the part of it that's dying, harvesting the essence of it that has a place in the future. And there has to be a way to do this as a collective, to ceremonize it, to do the honoring of it, because what we're describing is a way of living and a way of being that doesn't just live in the exterior world of artifacts and bodies and things, but rather a world that in the epoch story we describe as the place alongside his story is the her story, the living, vibrant essence that's emerging. So it's one thing looking at it in the historic sense, it's another thing living into this moment in time and being individually and collectively a medium through which, with which, this process can be eased. That's why the step 1, slide 1 said, well, what is the quality that you feel called to bring forward? And when I wrote that document initially, my in the moment response was space of kindness, conductive space of kindness that has no end to it, because there is so much space we need to support all these processes. So I'm going to give you here the space to make a comment to that. Then we're going to land episode 22 and pick up slide 6 on Universalis 23, which may be just right to not think that we will do everything inside 22. There has to be a 23 that will follow 22. So, but what would you want to say to that, please?
I think, as you said, often it takes a long time to build something, a lot of efforts, and then it can just collapse in, in one moment. Of course, there are before tremors. The tremors need to be detected, we need to be forensic, and we need to be proactive before something completely collapses and takes us by surprise. But if we study a little bit history or her story, we always see that after a fall of or the end of an era, a new era arose, and actually some of the building blocks of the new era were the debris of the previous era, which is also interesting in relation with the metamorphosis of the crab that I was talking before. The crab eats then the old body to take the calcium to build the new body. So, for instance, after the fall of the Byzantine Empire, which was a very big and very, very important civilization, with Constantinople as the capital of the left part, let's say, of the Roman Empire. It was because of that collapse that a lot of the people that were holding the knowledge, the ancient knowledge, fled to Italy, and they were the agents in a way of knowledge, of wisdom. That was a very important part in the birth of the Renaissance. If that would not happen, it wouldn't be the same. So what I'm saying is that in every collapse there are opportunities. We just need to have the clarity and the openness and the neutrality to see them, and to allow them also. So to see what are the parts that are maybe taking us backwards, and what are the opportunities that will take us forward.
Yeah, every generation spans that of their parents and that of their children and grandchildren. And as I'm contemplating this, there's a tinge of sadness when I think about the values and the beliefs that my parents held that have been so eroded. And there's a poignancy in that, because in a way to honor that, we have to somehow work through to the core of what they were, not the apparentness of how they manifested in their particular generation, but the kind of core essence, humanity that they were holding to. And arc, not to go back to that, but to arc with the indelible aspects, and to kind of take them forward and see where they can be almost reseeded, find new ground where they can hold and have new life. And it may skip a generation. So there's a great wisdom somehow in not holding on. You talked about the leaf and the brittleness, and there's a wisdom in knowing when to let go before things get brittle, and to hold. And sometimes, like a seed, things maybe need to be held under the ground in a almost frozen state until there's the right ecology and the right time, because there's no known that it will be this ecology, this generation. It may be another. I think this is prompting quite a few thoughts, but I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you both. So this last note from you, Karen, has the sense of what you describe as the tinge of sadness is part of what, when we describe the 5 stories of the epoch, is part of story 4, and the processing and the metabolizing of the dialectic story, in which we do that sifting that you're describing, that enables us to look at previous generations and honor their core essence in a way like Kyriaki, like you're describing, that there was an essence, there was a Byzantine essence that seeded the rise of the Renaissance. And in a similar way, Karen, you're offering that a set of values of the generation that grew through the Second World War, and in a way through the legacy of 2 world wars, and created the second half of fashioned the second half of the 20th century, which was a time of peace and prosperity. And what the later part of the 20th century, peace and prosperity, that got unleashed by postmodernity, by the hippie movement in the earlier phase of the second half of the 20th century, how that became a free-for-all, loosening of any traditional values and standards that previous generation that came through hardship was fashioned by. They were fashioned by an actuality that called for the call for duty, a call for service, a call for those values that in the late 20th century, early 21st century, people would sometimes scoff at in various places, and because it became so much about the self. But if you follow the trace we are offering, it is, and this entire trace we're making here is truly in the context of the next 30 years, next 3 decades, in the broader context of the next 3 centuries. That's when I said let's do a triage to fortify our resolve about the process that we are part of. It does bring forward the awareness of what's about to unfold in the coming decades. Will have and is already having a tone of reckoning, and some will likely experience some aspects of it as rude awakening. And that's not me saying it's all going to be disaster, not at all. I'm saying that the whole spectrum, the whole range of above the line and below the line, promising and challenging trends are converging. And one can foresee the harvesting of that essence of duty and service and honor, and becoming, in the way we're describing here, your own agentic self inside an even bigger mission that you are part of, in essence, building the cathedral of tomorrow, but not the cathedral of stone outside, but the human cathedral on the inside. You can imagine and envision these becoming more critically important, especially with where some of the next slides will lead, which will touch about We'll touch the story of the AI revolution and the challenges it brings that will task us to ask what's the inherent value of human life. So I'm proposing that we land it here and we pick up the story in Universalis 23 and continue to unfold all the way to slide 12. How about that?
Yes, looking forward. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Seems an appropriate place to pause.
We will see you on Universalis 23. We now know we will call this one self-leadership inside the violet intensification, and we will likely call the next one the currency of the future. See you in our next exploration.
Along with our website at portalsofperception.org, Portals is also available on YouTube and on all podcast platforms, as well as social media. You can become an active member and join the conversation in community events. And you can help us get the word out by liking this content and by sharing it with your friends.